Is Diego Pavia underrated?
You are Locked On Vandy, your daily podcast on the Vanderbilt Commodores. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Vandy podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Corey Burton. Thanks for making Locked On Vandy your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. On today's episode, we explore what Bama brings to the table in Vandy's first conference home game. Clark Lea was very intrigued by New Mexico State and made a lot of moves to bring that identity to Nashville. But why? Before we get into all that, when you see quarterback rankings, is Diego Pavia underrated, overlooked? Well, we're going to explore that, and I'm going to tell you why he's actually underrated in that matter. And when you look at the list, okay, so in the conference, you have names like Brady Cook, Jackson Dart, Carson Beck, Quinn Ewers, Jalen Milroe, Nico Iamalava. Like, those are names that, like, you hear and you're like, okay, those are guys. All right, those are guys that have proven. Whatever order you could argue at the top, kind of irrelevant to this discussion. Personally, I think it's Carson Beck, then Jackson Dart, then Brady Cook, then Quinn Ewers, then Jalen Milroe, then Nico. But then you get into names like Graham Mertz, Garrett Nussmeier, Connor Wegman, Jackson Arnold, Talon Green, Lenora Sellers, Brock Vandegrift, Peyton Thorne, Blake Shapen, and Diego Pavia. So here's my thing, okay? Here's why I think he's underrated, okay? You look at Peyton Thorne at Auburn. Diego Pavia beat him head-to-head, and it wasn't close. Diego Pavia looked like the far superior quarterback in that matchup. Now, I get it. Diego Pavia has not gone through the grind of the SEC, but he looked like the far superior quarterback in that matchup. Blake Shapen, what has he done? How do we know he's better? Diego Pavia actually won an SEC game in an SEC environment. So you naturally have to say, well, he's better than Blake Shapen, at least on paper. Blake Shapen is talented. But what do we know that he's going to do at Mississippi State? That Diego Pavia already has one SEC win under his belt. So that immediately on paper makes it better than Blake Shapen. Brock Vandegrift, same thing. How do we know Brock Vandegrift is better than Diego Pavia? Has Brock Vandegrift started and won on SEC soil? Did he lead a team to 10 wins? No. He's extremely talented, former 5-star guy. You look at, talented attributes. Yeah, he's bigger, stronger, faster probably than Diego Pavia. You look at, physical talent. You look at recruiting rankings. Yeah, he's better, but is he a better quarterback? Remains to be seen, but at this point, I just don't see it. You'll see that one play out head-to-head. So 3 of these that I'm talking about, you'll see play out head-to-head. Peyton Thorne, Brock Vandegrift, Lenora Sellers. Again, we just don't know because he hasn't played. He sat behind Spencer Rattler. So how do we know? Right? Just by virtue of Diego Pavia having a full year of starting under his belt, that's got to count for something, right? Even if it was at New Mexico State, he started in college and won at Auburn. That's got to count for something. So I think that knocks Lenora Sellers off the list. Talon Green. All right, you can make an argument there, but still, we just don't know. Jackson Arnold, Dylan Gabriel was starting quarterback last year. How do we know? Garrett Nussmeier. You had a dude win a Heisman in front of you. Now, I will say Garrett Nussmeier came in relief in the SEC championship the year before and lit Georgia's secondary up. So you could make an argument about Garrett Nussmeier. He can sling the rock. Okay, I can give you that one. I can see that one. I can be like, okay, I see what you're thinking here. Graham Mertz, what has he done? He started a full SEC slate, but I don't think he's a better quarterback than Diego Pavia. I just don't. I think Diego Pavia brings more to the table with running ability. He's more of a 5-tool guy, right? And then Nico, Jalen, Quinn, Carson Beck, Jackson Dart, Brady Cook. I think all those are indeed better than Diego Pavia. I think Pavia is around the 8-9 mark as far as quarterbacks coming into this league because of what he's done, because of the experience he's had. I mean, you knock off 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 guys with starting experience just right off the bat. I think 5 is fair. 5 is a fair number. I think you knock 5 guys off there in front of him. Then you knock Peyton Thorne out because you lost the head-to-head battle, right? Like that doesn't count for anything. I get it. This is turning into a team ranking. Vanderbilt, he's a quarterback on the worst team in the conference. Okay, I get it. But let's look at what he brings now. Okay, so I told you kind of what the guys in front of him. You know, I told you why I think they should be off the list, right? Blake Shapen at 15, Peyton Thorne at 14, Vandegrift 13, Lenore Sellers 12, Taylor Green 11, Jackson Arnold 10, Connor Wegman 9, Garrett Nussmeier 8, Graham Mertz 7. I think that whole list should be reorganized from 7 down. This is that SEC podcast rankings. Go on their X account and see their full rankings. But I think just that group should be completely rearranged because of experience alone playing college quarterback, especially in the SEC. Diego Pavia played 1 game in the SEC and he's 1-0 against Auburn. Okay, so what Diego Pavia brings to the table? Running ability. Let's look at that. Okay, he's dangerous as a runner. Okay, if you look at just that attribute. Peyton Thorne, okay, I can see Peyton Thorne as a runner. Brock Vandegrift, he can run, but that's not what he does. Lenore Sellers, okay, I can see it. Taylor Green, okay, I got you. But who else runs out of that group, right? So, like, the fact that he's in a very short list of guys that could run in that list, I think that moves him up. I think that moves Peyton Thorne up a little bit, truthfully, because Peyton Thorne has a full season under his belt. I think Peyton Thorne is a little bit too low. And it's so easy to hate on Auburn. I enjoy it, but Peyton Thorne's better than 14. I think he's better than these guys that haven't played in the conference yet. I think he's a step above Mertz. Not much, but I think he's a step above Mertz. All right. Look at passing ability. Okay. Like if you just look at pure throwing ability, arm strength. Okay. It might be fair. I think he probably has the weakest arm out of this list. Okay. All right. There you go. There's one last place finish. So I'm not being completely biased, which is the Locked On Vandy podcast. So there's a little bit of bias here, but I'll give you that. He doesn't have the strongest arm. He has the 16th strongest arm in the SEC. I can. Okay. Now he's a master of the offense. He's a master of the scheme. I don't think any of these guys are masters of the scheme. Blake Shapen, brand new system. Is he a master of that? I don't know. It's a brand new scheme. Brand new head coach, Jeff Lebby. He'll be good in that scheme, but he's no master of it. So I don't think he's going to execute right away. Diego Pavia, I think, will execute right away because of that. I think that instantly gives Vandy a shot. Now, whether they're deep enough as a roster, it's going to come down to strength and conditioning for Vanderbilt. It's not going to come down to ability. They're going to have great schemes. I don't know if they have the strength and conditioning to execute those schemes over the course of that schedule, but that's a different story for a different day. But Diego Pavia is a master of his scheme. I think that immediately at this point. Now let's look at this. Now let's look at this ranking at the end of the season. Let's see how they do. And I can come up with my own rankings if you want me to. That might be a project I could do. All right, but Diego Pavia, I think, is immediately better than Blake Shapen. Okay, Peyton Thorne, he has a year under Hugh Freeze. Okay, same plane as far as expert, but Diego Pavia won head-to-head, so I think Diego Pavia now moves up to 14. All right, Brock Vandegrift. He just enrolled in January. Nope, he's not a master of that. He hasn't played in the SEC yet. He hasn't really done anything or proving anything. He may not win the starting job for Kentucky. He may not last the whole season for Kentucky. We don't know anything about what Brock Vandegrift can do as a starter. He's certainly not a master of the scheme, but he's got a powerful arm and he can throw. He's a good quarterback. He just hasn't proven that yet. He's a great talent. He just hasn't proven that he's a great quarterback at the SEC level. Hadn't proven it yet. Right? Not downgrading him, but he just hasn't shown us yet. Lenore Sellers, great runner, but what has he done? Show me. Again, is he a master of the system? Maybe. I don't know. I don't know if he can do everything that Spencer Rattler did. Spencer Rattler was a true master of that scheme. I think Lenore Sellers has a ton of talent, and I think he's going to be a reason why South Carolina is competitive, but there's a lot of reasons why I don't think South Carolina is going to be competitive, but Lenore Sellers is definitely not one of those. I don't know. Taylon Green? We just don't know. We don't know. So that experience, I think, knocks him out. Connor Wegman, brand new scheme. Not a master. Jackson Arnold, probably a master. Okay. I give you a little bit of jet. Well, I don't know. His scheme left and went to Mississippi State. So what do we know about him? Garrett Nussmeier, master of the scheme. Graham Mertz, I think, master of the scheme. All right, from 6 up, everybody's there. So I think every metric you try to use for Diego Pavia, I think puts him at the 8 or 9 spot in the conference. I think you knock Graham Mertz out of 7. I think you bump Wegman up to 7. I think Nussmeier is good around 8 or 9. I think Diego Pavia and Garrett Nussmeier are good around that point. And then 10 is good. And I think you just bump everybody down. Maybe bump Peyton Thorne up above. Peyton Thorne should not be below Brock Vandegrift and Lenore Sellers, for sure. Because he's had a full year. He might even bump up to 10 because he's had a full year of experience. These guys just aren't experienced. Now we'll see what the production is and rank them at the end. It's kind of the pre-test. But I think Diego Pavia is way underrated. He is not dead last in the conference. So I don't know. But he was a master in the system with New Mexico State, came in and just completely, utterly dismantled Auburn. That game was very pivotal in a lot of ways. It helped Clark Lea shape his new philosophy. So what stood out about New Mexico State? Why New Mexico State? Why that in particular? We'll talk about it next. All right, this episode is brought to you by Gametime. Yep, Gametime is the authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and the lowest price guarantee, Gametime takes all of the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. So I get anytime I talk about Gametime, I get asked this question: why do you think Gametime is a great app? Why shouldn't I go to another place? I was about to name somebody. Why shouldn't I go somewhere else? Well, here's why. Because there's last-minute deals, right? So you can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concert, anything you want to go to, comedy, theater, whatever. 60% off buying last minute. What other places have last minute deals? Hey, buy these tickets up, right? Flash deals. You can save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. There might be a featured section, stuff like that. That's flash deals. Zone deals, okay? This is good for all sections. You choose the section, let Gametime choose the seats. They offer deals on that. All-in pricing. I love all of these features, right? All-in pricing shows you the total up front, which lets you know there's no surprise fees at checkout. You get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. I love that. That's my favorite thing because you see what you're going to see. The lowest price guarantee or Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Plus, Gametime has the best ticket coverage in the game. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. All that stuff is great, man. So this is what you need to do. You can take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege. Let me spell it out for you. LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets. Lowest price. Guaranteed. All right, welcome back. Are you watching ESPN, Fox Sports? Are you tired of all that shouting? You have to turn on the TV and all that stuff. Well, you should check out Locked On Sports today. You already know. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And speaking of every day, shout out to the everydayers. Thank you for making us part of your day. Thank you also for making us your first listen. Shout out to you everydayers, and shout out to you that want to become everydayers. Shout out to you. Shout out to anybody that tunes in. I appreciate you guys for sure. So, what stood out about New Mexico State? I know a lot. That's on a lot of people's mind. Like, why, out of all the programs he could poach from, why New Mexico State? Well, first of all, when you look at New Mexico State, and there was a really, really, really cool article written on this one, and it was written by Joey Dwyer of VandySports.com. This was really cool because nobody had really ever laid it out there. And he asked Clark Lea, and why New Mexico State, right? Well, I think the first thing that kind of stands out, obviously, is the Jerry Kill angle, right? I mean, Jerry Kill is instrumental in building programs, right? He's built two programs as the actual head coach at Minnesota and New Mexico State. But he's also been behind the scenes of a lot of rebuilds, like TCU, like when Gary Patterson was doing his thing, he kind of helped rebuild that whole thing, right? And he helped get TCU into the national title game. Well, it was one of those things where he was behind that, right? And so he's somebody that's very influential in the program. He is a great offensive mind, I think, as far as knowing what to do, knowing what buttons to press for each player, being relatable to the players, and just kind of overall structure of the program. I think that's something that's enticing. And he was in a situation to where he was retiring because he was having all these medical problems, right? And I think he showcased to the world, he showcased to the world probably a lot during his career at Minnesota. I think he put the college football world on notice, but I think he really put the college football world on notice this past November when he waltzed into Auburn and trounced the Tigers. And it wasn't a fluke either. It looked like they were well in control of that game the whole time. It looked like they were just toying with them. Auburn had no answers, and you can say what you want about Auburn, but they got flat out curb stomped that day. And I think even Zach Blackerby would agree with that. Jake Crane would even agree with that. Yeah, they didn't play their best, but even when you don't play your best in the SEC, you still win those games, right? you certainly don't get beat 31-7. They were just they were outclassed by a team with lesser talent on paper. They were just completely outclassed, outcoached, outmaneuvered, out everything except out recruited, right? And it proves that this is very much a coaching game. So when Clark Lea was looking for his rebuild, which after the final horn blew in the Tennessee game, which marked the end for a completely abysmal 2-10 season, he looked at this and said, oh crap, this is bad. This is really bad. I got to make some changes. We have no identity on offense. Our defense is paper mache, Swiss cheese, whatever you want to call it, right? This is awful. Okay. So how am I going to, so he probably thought, this is over the course of a couple of months when all this happened, but he's like, okay, well, here's what I need to do. Okay, I need to take over the defense, which he did. That was his first move. Fired defense coordinator, demoted him, and who eventually left. So call it what you want, but he fired defense coordinator. He took over the defense, and then he fired the offensive coordinator. He said, you know what? Here at Vandy, we need an identity, and that identity can't be cookie cutter, what everybody else is doing in the league and what everybody else is doing in the conference. He needed to be outside the box because when you're at a talent disadvantage, you kind of have to be that way. It's how the service academies win. Not saying Vandy's a service academy, but like there's ways you have to go about constructing your schemes, offense and defense, and even special teams, to where you have to think outside the box, right? So he went and said, okay, here's a team that walked into an SEC place, dominated, and it was because it wasn't a fluke. They were outmatched. So he hired Tim Beck. No matter where he came to in the process, it always circled back to Tim Beck. That's who the offensive coordinator. There was many names thrown around as offensive coordinator. There's many possibilities, but I think ultimately it landed on Tim Beck, and that was awesome. And I think that sparked a run of things that got Vandy where they are now. Okay, because you get Tim Beck, so now you got your coordinators in place, right? And then you get some transfer portal guys saying, okay, well, this is, you get Nate Johnson immediately, some offensive linemen. He had some defensive guys already committed because he took over the defense. He had some guys that were probably looking to jump in the portal that didn't. And then Jerry Kill comes aboard. Okay. Well, Jerry Kill solves a lot of problems. Jerry Kill comes in and says, okay, well, I can help you build a program. I can help mentor you from behind the scenes. I can't be on the field. My health is, I need a low-key job, right? And so he hired Jerry Kill. Jerry Kill is an advisor, allows Clark Lea to focus a lot of his attention on the defense. That opens a lot of doors for Clark Lea to be able to really turn this defense around, because Clark Lea is that head coach presence and does actually have some head coaching power, a little bit, enough to be kind of a substitute when needed. But obviously he's not the head coach, but he is basically the off the field head coach, and the one that can kind of be that extra set of eyes to where he can be like, all right, Clark, we got this. Just do your thing over there, right? So it allows Clark Lea to be a true defensive coordinator. So I think a lot of that influence, and then they started hiring staff members. They started getting transfer guys, and they started really kind of constructing their roster based off of that New Mexico State philosophy, the philosophy that Jerry Kill implemented, that the coaching staff and the players upheld, and he got the core of those guys. And it just was something that was different. It was outside the box. It was unique. It was, well, not really necessarily unique, but it was the way things were structured. I think there was a great flow to it. It seemed very organized, very, it had a steadfast goal. And they attempted they attempted to build all that. They did. They were successful. And they got results. They won 10 games at New Mexico State, which is I don't get it. But so that's kind of what stood out. It was just the whole structure of the thing, the way they constructed their offense, the way they did defensively, the way it just seemed like they were very well prepared. Fundamentals was really good. Just everything about it just seemed like they understood that, hey, we need to focus on all the nuances of the game so that we can give ourselves a chance. So, but speaking of chances, and we'll dive more into that. I'm interested to see what Kurt Page says about that and the New Mexico State influence and kind of what stood out about that. But I'm interested to dive deeper into this topic, and you'll see it kind of play out. But does Vandy really have a shot against Alabama? That's their first conference home game. Do they have a shot? We'll talk about it. All right, welcome back. It's the third and final segment, a very short segment. As we wrap up this show, first of all, thank you to the everydayers for making all this possible. Find me at Locked On Vandy on all social media platforms. Thank you for making us part of your day. I hope you had a really good 4th of July holiday. I hope you were safe, all that good stuff. But Bama. And we're going to bring on some Bama people here to really kind of talk more in depth about Bama. But does Vandy really have a shot at Bama? I think if you always have a shot, right? But being realistic about it, no, I think Bama's Bama, right? I can sit up here and tell you reasons why they have a shot. I be a little bit, I think that'd be a little much. But anyway, what does Bama actually bring to the table, though? That's the interesting part because, I think Vandy has a shot because football's football and crazy things can happen. Of course, right? Vandy's got a shot in every game right now. A lot of things can happen. However, albeit very, very not likely. The percentage of that is going to be low. Vandy's going to be a heavy underdog in this game. So don't get me wrong on that. All right. But what does Bama actually bring to the table? Well, they bring a new head coach. Nick Saban has retired if you were living under a rock. But if you're listening to the show, Nick Saban retired. Kalen DeBoer comes in. So there's going to be obvious adjustments to his coaching style, right? And you're going to see that right out of the gate. There's going to be obvious adjustments with scheme. Like you're going to see Bama play a scheme that you really haven't seen much of since Steve Sarkisian left, especially. I think it's going to look a lot like what Steve Sarkisian did because it's that Pac-12 influence a little bit. It's that, I think DeBoer and Sark are a lot alike in those schemes. So I think there's going to be, I think the biggest impact is going to be like you got a younger, hungrier coach coming in. I think you've got a very successful guy that has coached at some smaller places and had some success. Most recently, obviously, Washington taking over a dumpster fire and two seasons getting them to the title game, which they were grossly overmatched against Michigan, unfortunately. Washington was a great team, but Michigan, they just weren't going to beat them. But the biggest storyline with Alabama is Jalen Milroe. Jalen Milroe was a glorified running back last year for Bama, and a lot of times got them into trouble, as much trouble as you can get in for a playoff team that went 11-1. But again, Auburn had them on the ropes and blew the lead. And, there's a lot of things that happened with Bama that, their team kind of succeeded seemed like almost in spite of Jalen Milroe. But with better quarterback development coming in, how does that affect Jalen Milroe? I think it affects him a great deal. I think for the better. I think Jalen Milroe is going to be a lot better of a quarterback than a lot of people probably think. And I think the rankings reflect that. The rankings from segment 1, I think they reflect what kind of quarterback people think Jalen Milroe is going to be under Kalen DeBoer, which I think is accurate because Kalen DeBoer is really good at developing quarterbacks. He developed Michael Penix Jr., who is often injured. good talent, but could never really put it together. But now he was a first-round pick by the Atlanta Falcons, which was a controversial pick, but still talented enough. I think he would have gone in the 8 to 12 range in the draft regardless. So, and Kalen DeBoer brings that development to Alabama. You have an established athlete that has a good arm that just needs a little bit of seasoning, and I think you're going to get that with Jalen Milroe and Kalen DeBoer. And this defense, despite losing Dallas Turner, despite losing what they've lost, Terrion Arnold, and I could go through the whole list of guys they're losing, but this defense they're still Bama. Let's just, at the end of the day, to sum it up, because we got to get out of here, we'll get more in depth with Bama too. But to sum it up, Bama is still Bama. Last I checked, they still got a lot of 5 stars on that roster, and I don't know if you've looked at their recruiting, but they're still crushing it in recruiting. They're having no problems with recruiting, so that's scary, right? But anyway, we'll get more into depth about them as well. But does Vandy have a shot? Well, they always have a shot, but not really. But anyway, we'll welcome back, and we hope you have a great week, and we'll see you back here tomorrow. But as always, behave yourselves. Anchor down.